How
Hi.
are you?
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
I know it's 1 o'clock for some of you, 12 for others, and even still earlier for others, but are we ready to have some delicious Bordeaux today?
Are.
Hells yeah.
Fabulous. Well, everyone, thank you and welcome to our second Legende virtual happy hour tasting. I'm Dana Bruno. Many of us have met before. Many of us have met virtually multiple times. So it's wonderful to see you all here with us again. We know it's a crazy time right now. It continues to be a crazy time, but we're just so happy to be able to spend an hour with you to chat and catch up. So with that, feel free to use the chat box, but also feel free to interrupt, ask questions. We're here to answer anything that you may be curious about. There are no silly questions, so please ask away. So I think we should get started, right? So I think with that, I will introduce Diane Flamon, the winemaker of Legende, working with Domaine Baron de Rothschild. I'll also introduce Susan Ann Cosgrove, the Vice President of Marketing and PR for Taub Family Selections, and Cedric Villar, the Portfolio Director. So together, the four of us will kind of lead you through the tasting with Deanne, of course, being the fabulous woman here with the Bordeaux map and the wines being sort of the key element to lead us through today. So yeah, I think we're all ready. Let's relax and kind of transport ourselves and our taste buds to Bordeaux. Deanne, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, about your work, and a little bit about the wines we have in front of us today?
Yes, thank you, Dana. Hi, everyone from Bordeaux. I'm very, very happy to be with you and to share this tasting with you and my passion for the Bordeaux wines. A few words about me. I'm Diane Flamand. I'm enologist. I studied enology in Bordeaux a very long time ago, and I worked in many different places. I used to work for some great chateaus in the Medoc area, like Château Lingebage in Pauillac, Château Pichon-Longueville-Baron, Château Louden. I worked for some very famous Bordeaux negotiants too, like Barton and Guestier, BNG, for a few years. And I joined Domaine Baron de Rothschild 16 years ago in 2004 to be in charge of the collection range of wine for them. So I'm in charge of the selection, of the qualities, to guarantee the style and the quality vintage after vintage of this range of wine. And I'm in charge of the promotion of the wines in France and abroad too. You probably know that the date of birth of the group is the purchase of Chateau Lafite by the Rothschild family in 1868. And today, this is the sixth generation who runs the company with Saskia de Rothschild, Baron Eric's daughter, who runs the company since 2018, 2 years ago. She arrived at the same moment of the 150th anniversary of the purchase of Chateau Lafite by the Rothschild family. And you know, it's quite rare, but Chateau Lafite is one of the only chateaux in the Bordeaux region, which is owned by the same family since the 19th century, in fact. So a long history and a long legend too for the family in the Bordeaux region. As after the purchase of Chateau Lafite in 1868, the Rothschild family decided to extend first in the Bordeaux area. They purchased Chateau Duhart-Milon, a third classified growth in a fourth classified growth in Pauillac, situated very close to Chateau Lafite. And the two estates are run today by the same technical team in Pauillac. They purchased in 1984 Chateau Rieux-Sec in the Sauternes area, a classified growth from the 1855 classification too. And then in 1990, they purchased Chateau L'Évangile in Pomerol. After this first phase of expansion in Bordeaux, they decided to extend abroad. So they purchased Chateau Domaine Los Vascos in Chile in 1988, Caro in Argentina in 1999, and 99, they came back to France, in the south of France, where they purchased Domaine d'Aussière, close to Narbonne, in the Corbière area. And in 2008, the last acquisition of the group is Lomundai in China, where the family has planted 25 hectares of vines to produce a Chinese wine dedicated normally for the Chinese market. So to give you an idea, the group produces around 12 million bottles of wine everywhere per year. And we run around 2,000 hectares of vines, 4,500 acres of vines everywhere in France and abroad. In addition to these great estates and chateaus, they have decided to develop in the mid-90s a range of wines called the collection range. And the idea was to offer the consumers more approachable, accessible wines with reasonable prices, and wines ready to drink immediately after the bottling. You don't have to wait 10 years before opening a bottle. And this range of wine is called the Legende wines today. And I'm in charge of these wines for 16 years now. So the family has decided to focus on the 5 major appellations of Bordeaux. We produce a Bordeaux white, Bordeaux red, Saint-Émilion, Medoc, and Pauillac. And the idea is to have wines which are a good introduction to the complexity of the Bordeaux region, because very often Bordeaux is a little bit confusing for the people, for the consumers. You know, we have 57 different appellations. We have 3 different classifications. We are allowed to blend different grapes. So for people, it's a little bit confusing. And the idea with this range is really to offer the consumers very easy wine to understand, with all the qualities of the Bordeaux wines. And the main qualities of the Bordeaux wines are, on my opinion, great balance, great finesse, good freshness, good acidity on the palate, and good drinkability. All the Bordeaux wines should be very easy to drink and very easy to appreciate while eating. That's very important. They are not made really to be tasted alone. They are really made to be matched with food, in fact. And this good balance between the acidity, the alcohol content, which are always normally very balanced, gives drinkability, freshness to the wines. And in fact, the Legende wines, you have the Bordeaux white. We are going to taste first the Bordeaux white, and all these wines are really made to be enjoyable on their youth, on the freshness, with a lot of fruitiness on the nose. We are not looking for too much concentration, too much oak. We are really we are looking for good balance between the fruity aromas and the oaky notes, and a good balance between the alcohol content and the acidity. So, in fact, they have decided to develop this range. The 2 first appellations which were created in the mid-90s were Medoc and Pauillac, because of course Château Lafite is located in the Medoc area, so it was normal to start with these two famous appellations of the region. And then later, Bordeaux White, Bordeaux Red appeared. And the last appellation we added to the range was Saint-Emilion a few years ago with the 12 vintage. And I hope in the close future, I hope to add new appellations. So why not a Sauterne and why not a Pessac-Léognan, or why not a Graves, for example. I would love to do that, in fact. So you probably know that Bordeaux is the largest vineyard in the world producing fine wines, producing AOC wines. We have today 250,000 acres of vines, which is quite large. And we produce around 5 million hectoliters of wine per year. The production of Bordeaux is 90% red, 10% white. But perhaps you don't know, but until the end of the 60s, the white production in Bordeaux was more important than the red production. It has completely changed in the 40 past years, but and today 10% of the production of white, only for 90% of red, simply because the soil, the terroir, are more adapted to the production of great red wines than adapted to the production of very great white wines in Bordeaux. In people's mind, when we speak about Bordeaux, people think about the red wines first. Like when we speak about Burgundy, people very often think about great Bordeaux white first. So this is exactly the opposite. The Bordeaux white, like most of the dry white wines of Bordeaux, is produced in the Entre-deux-Mers region, which is this big area situated between the two rivers. You know that Bordeaux is crossed by the Gironde, the Garonne River and the Dordogne River, both giving the Gironde estuary. And most of the Bordeaux white are produced in the Entre-deux-Mers region. And you know that we are able and we are authorized to blend different grapes in Bordeaux, which is a big chance for us. And in Bordeaux, we can, for the Bordeaux white, we can blend the Sauvignon white, the Sauvignon blanc, Sémillon, and Muscadet. The Legende Bordeaux white is a blend of 85% Sauvignon blanc and 15% of Sémillon. When I arrived 16 years ago, this white was made with a majority of Sémillon, 60%, 70% Sémillon, and 30-40% Sauvignon only, simply because Sémillon is the iconic grape of Château Rieussec in the Sauterne region. And at the beginning, the family wanted to produce a dry white wine coming from Sémillon grape. And it was a demand of the market, and notably of the US market, when I arrived in 2004, to progressively increase the percentage of Sauvignon Blanc in order to produce something perhaps more aromatic when the wine is very young, because Sauvignon Blanc gives a lot of very aromatic, expressive, explosive aromas of grapefruit, lime, lemon, mineral notes. Sauvignon Blanc is very pleasant when it's young. And Sauvignon Blanc gives a lot of freshness, crispness on the palate. Most of the Bordeaux white, dry Bordeaux white, are made with a high percentage of Sauvignon Blanc, because this grape really gives very expressive and explosive wines on the nose. Sémillon, on contrary, is more discreet when it's young and acquires beautiful aromas while aging in bottles. That's why most of the Sauterne wines are made with Sémillon, a very high percentage of Sémillon. And some great Pessac-Léognan white are made with a high percentage of Sémillon, because Sémillon ages very well in bottles and acquires very good aromas. and Semillon is more round, soft, and give more volume on the palate too. So that's very important for us as a winemaker to blend these two grapes in order to reach a perfect balance and to keep the style and the quality vintage after vintage. So this Bordeaux white, do you all have a glass of white Legend in front of you for the tasting or not?
Yes, everyone feel free
Yes,
to open
everybody?
and start, please. Yes, Diane, I don't know if you there's quite a few.
We are very lucky because you are at the aperitif for noon in United States, and I am at the aperitif at 7 in France. So this white is perfect to drink alone as an aperitif. It opens appetite because it's very fresh, crisp, a lot of very nice aromas. At the same time, citrus, grapefruit, lime, lemon aromas on the nose, some mineral notes too. And we like to drink it in Bordeaux with oysters and seafood. And it's really the perfect match with this kind of meal. You know what? If you have some questions or if you have some comments, I would be very, very happy to have your direct feedback about all these wines. So don't hesitate to ask me questions if need be.
I don't see any questions yet, Diane, but first of all, I think we have a lot of people from all over the country, which is amazing. And Kelsey love the balance of the Sauvignon Blanc and the Semillon, very crisp and zesty, refreshing melon and fresh fruit notes. She would love to make that one like one of her staple whites. I agree that that's a beautiful white, Diane. I have always a bottle of that one in my fridge, and nice to be drinking all year long. And by itself, I agree, like a appetizer or even by itself, or like as an aperitif.
And the temperature of service is very, very important. You should drink it very cool, around 12, 14 degrees. So very, very fresh.
We do have a question from Janet. Diane, when did you achieve that particular percentage of Sauvignon Blanc? And how were you able to change the percentages? Did you increase just a little bit each year? Did you have to increase, you know, like, how did you do that?
I did it very progressively, of course, because it was impossible to change the style from one year to another vintage very quickly. So progressively, since in the 15 past years, progressively, I increased the percentage of Sauvignon Blanc and decrease a little bit Semillon. And finally, I think that between 80 and 85%, this is the maximum. We need Semillon in order to balance the acidity of Sauvignon Blanc. So I think now I will keep this, or try to keep, because it depends on the vintage sometimes, but at least I will try to keep this final blend vintage after vintage.
So we have a comment from Dave McIntyre, who like the wine as well, very refreshing and crisp, but he's a big Semillon fan, so he's a bit of disappointed that the US demand took you to put like more like Sauvignon Blanc in it. We have a question from Jeff as well. He's the Legend wine more for the export markets. Do you have it in France as well, Diane?
It's mainly exported, you know. We export 95% of the Legend wines, yes. So it's fresh, fruity. This wine, this is a 19 vintage, we have just harvested the white grapes in Bordeaux for the 20 vintage, And this 19 vintage is made to drink in the 1-2 years following the harvest. So you have no oak. It's really made to drink on the freshness and on the fruit.
Okay.
And the 20 vintage will be on the market next year. So, you know, it's really made to enjoy very, very young.
Just before we get into the red, Diane, we have
Yes.
a couple of questions. Kelsey wanted to know how many whites is Legend producing now? So it's the only white, right? In the Legend
Yes,
Red.
in the Legend series, this is the only white, dry white wine, but we produce dry white wine in the other estates of the group. At Château-Rieux-Sec, we have a dry white wine. Aire de Rieux-Sec, we have dry white wine, of course, at Domaine d'Ossière, in Los Vascos. But in the Legend series, yes, this is the only white. I would like to produce a Grave white one day. Why not? It would be very nice.
Yeah.
Another style with oak fermented in barrels to have the two different styles of Bordeaux white in the range. It would be very, very interesting for me to do that.
And just to kind of jump on Dave's comments as well about the Sémillon fan, the Ardeur-Rieux-Sec in the portfolio of Lafite Rothschild wines has a bit of more Sémillon, right, than Sauvignon Blanc versus the Legend, right? So it's
Yes.
kind of actually
It
nice.
depends on the vintage, but you have much more Sémillon in the Ardeur-Rieux-Sec than in the Legend white. Yes, you're right.
So we have a lot of oyster fans.
Yes.
I was just going to say that. Lots of oyster fans out there. Looks like everyone's
sure,
getting some oysters for cocktail hour.
I'm sure that most of you have been to Bordeaux before and have enjoyed a glass of white Bordeaux with oysters in Bordeaux, I'm sure.
Diane, do you know the percentage of women winemakers in France? And maybe can you tell us about yourself as a woman winemaker, you know, your experience in Bordeaux?
I don't know the percentage, probably less than in United States, because we are more narrow-minded in France, you know. But when I started my career a long time ago, 30 years ago, we were a few women in this industry. And today, 50% of the enologists are women, in fact. Not in the production, but 50% of the enologists now are women. So they work in laboratory or they are in the trade part of the business. For me, you don't find a lot of women, even if, of course, it's increasing, but French, it's still a very, very difficult world for the woman.
Okay. Irene, the price point of the Legend Bordeaux White is $19 in the US.
And then, Diane, Dave was asking, would you ever consider putting Sauvignon Blanc on the label, since many US wine drinkers don't know what comprises Bordeaux Blanc?
But you know, normally in Bordeaux, you are not supposed to focus on the grape. That's our problem. So it's just tolerated for the US market. But for the moment, we could put Sauvignon Blanc because we have 85%, and it would be possible to put Sauvignon Blanc on the label. But as we want to promote the Bordeaux region, in fact, and not the Sauvignon grape and the grape varieties, we decided not to put Sauvignon Blanc on the label. That's why.
It is on the back label, Diane, right? But
this is on the back label, of course. You have the blend on all the back labels. The Bordeaux Red, 17 vintage. The Bordeaux Red, like the Bordeaux White, is produced in the Entre-deux-Mains region, and this wine, like the white, is made to drink in a few years following the harvest. It's really made to drink on the fruit It's very it's oaked, but only 40% of the final blend is oaked. So the oaky taste is not prevailing on the nose. Again, the aim is to have a good balance between fruit and the toasty, nice vanilla touch on the nose. And the blend is mainly Cabernet Sauvignon, 60% Cabernet Sauvignon, 40% Merlot, because simply Cabernet Sauvignon is, of course, the main grape of Chateau Lafite, and all the winemakers at DBR are big fan of Cabernet Sauvignon, and so I am. And Cabernet Sauvignon gives the wine a very nice elegance, a good structure, beautiful aromas of blackcurrant and peppery aromas, and potential of aging of the wine too. And Merlot gives more fruity notes, soft and ripe tannins. And it's very important, like for the white, to blend these two grapes to simply to reach more complexity and more balance. And for us, it's always better to blend different grapes, because each grape gives a final blend, it's their own characters, their own qualities, and you reach always, for me, it's my own opinion, but I think that you reach more complexity and better quality when you can blend and play on the different blend. So this wine, like the red, like the white, is really made to drink young. And 17 was difficult vintage in Bordeaux. You probably remember that it was, we had a very big frost at the end of April, which destroyed 80% of the production in Bordeaux. And it was the lowest crop in Bordeaux since the 91 frost. So it was a quite difficult year. But this vintage produced some very good wines and ready to drink much earlier than great vintages like 16, 15. So finally, this is a perfect vintage to drink now. Even for some classified growth and some Cru Bourgeois and some Chateau wines, the 17 are very, very, very nice to drink now. So it's perfect because this vintage allows you to wait for the more powerful vintages, which can age much longer time, in fact. Do you have any comment about the red, perhaps?
I don't see any questions right now. What would be some food pairing for the Bordeaux Red, Diane?
You know, this is a wine I like to drink. It's every day with my friends, but with some, you know, pizza or something very simple, in fact. It's really a wine that you can match with daily cooking and daily food. With the pasta, it's very nice too, and pizza and hamburgers, and you know, something very simple.
Cheese, even by itself, right? It's got like that nice fruit, but like maybe cheese.
Cheese, yes, of course, but with cheeses, I would choose more powerful wines, like Saint-Emilion, Medoc, or Pauillac, for example. Okay. But, you know, in France, we are really very, very...
yes.
Yes.
So, and just to go back quickly to the Bordeaux Blanc, I had some cheese questions there as well. So Cedric, even jump in here. Any cheese recommendations for the Blanc at all as well?
The white Bordeaux are very nice with goat cheeses.
Yeah.
I like it with goat cheeses. Yes.
Right. And we're getting a lot of great comments. Kelsey says it's a very drinkable red. The oak notes are subtle, so I think I like it even more. Virginia said, beautiful balance. What a great value and everyday dinner wine. And Dave said it was great last night with a Chinese beef stir fry. Jeff has some questions. At which point in the process do you decide which fruit will go into each wine? is it based on the vineyard, or do you wait until later in the process?
I'm waiting later in the process. I'm waiting at the end of the winemaking, in fact. When the wine are finished, I prefer to taste finished wines in order to taste the result of each grapes, each vats, and then to start to blend them together and to choose the perfect match and the perfect balance.
Wonderful. And we're still getting, Ron says a very pleasant spiciness. Lynn says there's a nice finish to this. Kelsey, I'd like this red Bordeaux with this aged Gouda I just discovered, made in upstate New York. Wonderful. So yeah, I think we've got 27 minutes. So I think if there's no more questions on this one, we can move on to the next.
So the three last appellations, Saint-Emilion, Medoc, and Pauillac, so they are top appellations in Bordeaux, and they are treated a little bit like our chateau wines. That means that they are aged in barrels for 12 months, not 100% of the wine, but partly aged in barrels. They are bottled, and then we keep the bottle in our cellars a few months before selling them on the market, because we think that the wines are always a little bit tired after the bottling, and we want the wine remain very quiet in our cellars at constant temperature, constant humidity, and then the wines come. You know, I don't know if you have ever tasted a wine just after the bottling. It's a little bit tired, you know, it loses aromas, it loses structure, and then it needs time to recover all its quality, their qualities. So these three wines are treated exactly like the Duard Milon or l'Evangile or Château Lafite. So we bottle the wines, we keep them a few months very quiet in the cellars, and then when all the qualities are back, we label them and we ship them. So they are really treated like our great estates. The Saint-Emilion is the last appellation we added to the range, so 6 years ago now. And the Saint-Emilion is a very classy blend, 85% Merlot, 15% of Cabernet Franc. You don't have a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon in the Saint-Emilion wines traditionally. And you see that we respect the character, the classic blend of each appellation in order to offer the consumers a very classic Saint-Emilion wine. This wine, because it's a great appellation, Saint-Emilion, because it's a great vintage too. 16 was probably one of the best vintage in Bordeaux in the last decade. This wine can age at least between 5 and 10 years without problem. You can drink it now because it's made for that. But if you forget it in your cellar, it can age very, very well. These three wines need to be decanted too. You know, they need oxygenation, aeration to develop all their aromas, all their qualities. And it's really necessary before to serve them, to decant them in order to have the best quality possible at the moment of the tasting. So Saint-Emilion, you know that Merlot grape gives the wine a very nice, sweet, not crystallized, but comment on dit confiture?
Like jelly?
Oui, jammy aromas,
Jammy,
ripe
yes.
fruit, jammy aromas of strawberries, raspberries, round, ripe tannins. And Cabernet Franc is a grape which is very, very elegant, very complex on the nose with dried flowers, purpury aromas on the nose. And this wine is really very, very, very pleasant. And you know, it changes very, very quickly in the glass too. I opened the bottles 1 hour ago and it's still completely different from my first tasting 1 hour. It starts to have some what we call the tertiary aromas, you know, earthy aromas, spicy truffles aromas on the nose, which is very characteristic from the wine coming from the right bank, because Saint-Emilion is located on the right bank of the Dordogne River. And it has a very deep purple color and very ripe, soft tannins on the palate. So it makes Legende Saint-Emilion is very, very easy to drink, even now, even if 16 is quite young for Saint-Emilion. But this is the aim, you know. My aim is to produce wines very easy to drink immediately after the bottling.
It's a beautiful expression of the Saint-Emilion appellation, the wine. We have a question in terms of winemaking, just to actually, you just talking about it. What did you make differently with that wine to make it able to drink right now? Like compared to other Saint-Emilion wines, for example, that are made to age for long periods of time. What's your, in terms of winemaking, what do you do?
I would say that we are not looking for too much extraction of tannins during the winemaking. For example, we do very soft extraction of tannins in order to have only soft tannins and something easy to drink, which doesn't need 10 years before soften. And we focus on the fruity aromas too. So we ferment at around 25 degrees Celsius instead of 30, 32, in order to improve the red fruit aromas, the strawberry, raspberry aromas from Merlot. And the vatting time is quite short too, only 2 weeks instead of 3 or 4 weeks for wines which need to age and to mature a longer time in bottle. So it's just adaptation of the winemaking to the style of the Saint-Emilion. Okay. Or to the style of the Saint-Emilion, which is made to drink young.
Yeah. So you got a really nice comment from like on that wine and the style of the wine, that nice spice on it, like blueberries and spices, very lovely. Virginia is a big fan as well of Saint-Emilion, like one of her best memories actually. Besides, speaking of grapes during harvest in Sauternes, which we know is an amazing experience as well. Like she loved the Saint-Emilion, such a magical region, and it's true, it's beautiful,
yes.
Port of Bordeaux.
And it has a very long, spicy finish too.
Yes.
And definitely this wine should be matched with food or with lamb or with grilled meat or something, or meat with a sauce made with red wine, for example.
Dave wanted to know if all of the reds of age in those barrels coming from the cooperage of Chateau Lafite, or just the Pauillac?
Just the Pauillac is 100% aged in the barrels coming from Lafite. The Medoc and Saint-Emilion are not.
Okay.
We buy barrels, but not from Lafite. You know, the cooperage of Lafite produces only 2,000 barrels a year, but these barrels are still made for Chateau Lafite, Chateau du Harmillon, l'Évangile, and they don't produce enough barrels for everybody, you know, so that's why.
Mm-hmm. Should we taste the Medoc?
Yes, so it's very nice to compare a wine coming from the right bank, Saint-Emilion, and a wine coming from the red bank, Medoc, on the same vintage, in fact, because they are really very characteristic from each appellation. You should find more structure, more body, more tannins in the Medoc, because the Medoc is a very classic blend in this area, 60% Cabernet Sauvignon, 40% Merlot. And more Cabernet Sauvignon again means more spicy notes, more peppery aromas, more tannins, more structure, and more body on the palate. And again, I have decanted this wine before this tasting, like the Pauillac, and the nose is very open. That's always, you know, very frustrating to do this kind of tasting so far from you, because I don't know if the wine you have in your glass is the same exactly than the wine I have in my glass, but at least it's very open, very spicy and peppery, black pepper, very characteristic from the Cabernet Sauvignon and from the Medoc wines. A little bit of licorice too, and a lot of ripe fruit too, ripe red fruit. Again, 16 vintage was a great vintage in Bordeaux. And when you speak with the winemakers, they tell you that in 16, all the grapes, and notably Cabernet Sauvignon, reached a perfect maturity. And when we speak about a good maturity in Bordeaux, we speak about physiological maturity, but the maturity of the tannins too. And you know, in Bordeaux, we have a climate which is not very easy for the maturation of the grapes, but at 16, everything was perfect, and Cabernet Sauvignon reached a perfect maturity. And I think that the 16 vintage on the left bank is really beautiful. Have you tasted it?
Yeah, I can see that people are tasting it because I see a lot of comments. And quite a few people as well who, Kim and Dana, you went to the Medoc together?
Yes, it was like a Medoc Wine Council trip in like 2014. We were just reminiscing, like that was the best trip. The Medoc is so beautiful and unique, and this wine really showcases that 100%.
And another good way to visit the Medoc, I don't know if you guys know, but there is the Medoc Marathon. Actually, that's usually in September. It's a beautiful way. Actually, Diane and I run the marathon together. It's an amazing way to actually visit the vineyard and see. You actually run in the vineyard and you see like all those amazing chateaus, and they call it the longest marathon in the world because you have about 20-25 stations. Obviously, you taste one as you run, so it's a pretty amazing experience.
Yes, and unfortunately, the marathon has been cancelled this year due to the COVID crisis, you know. Mm-hmm. So it's really a pity, but I'm not sure, Cedric, that this is the best way to visit the Medoc, you know, because it's quite difficult. But, you know, it's very interesting to compare. If you come back to the Saint-Emilion, in terms of structure and body, you really have a wine from the right bank, so softer, rounder, more volume, ripe tannins, and a lot of perhaps easier to drink. And the Medoc, which is much more powerful on the palate with a lot of tannins, a long peppery finish too. So they are really very representative of each appellation. And this is the aim of this range, to be a good introduction to the Bordeaux complexity, finally.
We have another good question from Jeff, Diane, who would like to know, like for like the very good years, the very good vintages, like the 16, do you actually make more of the Medoc and the Pauillac than other more kind of...
Yes. What is interesting for me is that I can adjust the volume and the quantity produced to the quality of the vintage in Bordeaux. So for the, I would say the average vintage, like 13 or 14 or 17, I produced less than in 16, where everything was so good. And finally, I adjust the production to the quality of the vintage. And on the market, finally, you know, one vintage is following the following vintage. So it's I can do that. That's good. it's not like to run a chateau and to are obliged to produce with the grape coming from the estate, you know. When you produce a branded wine, you are quite free to adjust the quantity, to play on the different blend, to choose different suppliers, and it's much more easier for me, I think, to keep the same standard of quality, the same style, vintage after vintage, than when you produce a chateau wine, you are obliged to do with the grapes and the production of your chateau and your estate vintage after vintage. And I think that you have much more differences of quality from one vintage to another vintage for a chateau than for a branded wine, which are very, very regular vintage after vintage.
All right. And Pauillac?
And finally, the Pauillac. The Pauillac is in the range the only wine which is produced partly with wines coming from our two estates located in Pauillac, Château Lafite and Château du Harmillon. You know that all the chateaux in the Bordeaux region have produced minimum 2 labels. We speak about the first label and the second label. And in fact, I taste all the wines which have been eliminated from the selection of Château Lafite, Caruade de Lafite, Château du Harmillon, Moulin du Har, first and second label in each estate. I taste all the wines which have been eliminated from the 2 first selections, and I, of course, select the best wines and to produce this Pauillac. So this Pauillac is made with 80% of wines coming from Lafite and du Harmillon, both of them, and 20% coming from other estates. And this wine is aged in the barrels made by Château Lafite, made by our own cooperage for 12 months. And this wine can age quite well. You can keep it between 5 and 10 years too, because it's really matures very, very well in bottles. And you know, on the nose, you have a complexity due to the nice origin of the wine. Of course, you have some tobacco aromas, some tertiary aromas coming to a lot of spiciness, again, due to Cabernet Sauvignon, because of course, again, this wine is a blend, a very traditional blend in Pauillac, 70% Cabernet Sauvignon, 30% Merlot, always at least 60% Cabernet Sauvignon in the Pauillac. But finally, it makes a Pauillac which is very easy to drink, even today. So that's the aim again, and the goal of this range, to offer the consumers wines very characteristic of each appellation, but easy to drink, and you don't have to wait for 10 years before opening a bottle. That's the aim. And again, this wine is really made to be matched with food, of course, with a big, big piece of grilled beef or strong cheeses. It would be very, very good.
Like a nice steak or like lamb, right? Is a big classic pairing. Jeff would like to know about the Legend wines, if you feel that you have created a house style, like how are Legend wines different from other branded wines in Bordeaux?
I think that we are probably less concentrated, less oaky, because our style, you know, we everywhere in the world, and for the Legend series it's the same thing, but the winemakers working for Domaine Baron Rothschild, they have always in mind Château Lafite Rothschild. And the main qualities of Château Lafite are the finesse, the elegance, the balance, the drinkability, the freshness of the palate. And we are looking for all these qualities for most of our wines everywhere in the world. So I think this is something which is quite different from other brands in Bordeaux, because we have more Cabernet Sauvignon in the final blend when we can. Of course, not in Saint-Emilion, but in the Bordeaux, in the Medoc Pauillac. When we can, we put a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon, because simply Cabernet Sauvignon is really the iconic grape of the group. And we are not looking for too much extraction. The oak is always very discreet, very well married. And the freshness too, you know, when I vinify or select wines, I'm always very, very careful. I'm very careful with the alcohol content. I try never exceed 13.5. That's really, I know that it's a big problem in the United States today, but for a Bordeaux wine, I think, that's my opinion, a good Bordeaux wine, a balanced, classic Bordeaux wine shouldn't exceed 14 degrees Celsius, which is not very easy today with the changing of climate, with the drought. More and more, we have more and more dry and sunny and warm weather in summer. But normally 13, 14, good acidity, good amount of acidity, brings this freshness and drinkability to the wine. And a good bottle of wine is a bottle which should be finished, you know. A wine is not made to be tasted alone. It's really made to drink. You have to finish the bottle with your friends. And for that, you need freshness, balance, and drinkability. So you avoid too much oak, too much alcohol, and too much extraction, because it's a little bit tiring to drink this kind of wine.
Very well said. A lot of good comments about the Pauillac. What about the 60? We have a question here. Is 60% Cabernet Sauvignon an appellation requirement in Pauillac? And is it the same for the appellations we tasted today?
I didn't catch the question.
Do you have a requirement to have 60% Cabernet Sauvignon in the Pauillac, and what about the other appellations?
No, we don't have any requirements, but and a lot of Medoc wines today, unfortunately, that's my opinion again, are made with a high percentage of Merlot. But simply, I think that there are no more Medoc anymore, you know. Simply because Merlot is much more easier to understand, to appreciate by most of the people. But normally in Pauillac, most of the grapes planted are Cabernet Sauvignon, because this is the origin of the appellation to be made with a high percentage of Cabernet Sauvignon. And most of the classified growths still are made with a high percentage of Cabernet Sauvignon. So this Pauillac, for us, should be like a very classic Pauillac with a high percentage of Cabernet Sauvignon. But you're right, it's not always the case today. But finally, the problem today is that everything is, finally you find the same qualities, the same nose, the same grape, most of the time Merlot, in all the Bordeaux wines. And finally, it's more and more difficult to do the difference of the different appellations. It's a little bit a pity for me. I prefer to really respect the traditional classical blend of each appellation in order to have, you know, it's like 5 different characters of the same family, but they are really very distinctive, in fact. And in a blind tasting, it's you should distinguish them very easily because of the classic and traditional blend in it.
Diane, Irene would like to know if the pandemic affected the sales and the exports, and what about the tariffs on French wine?
What about the tourism?
The tariffs, les taxes sur les vins français?
Oh, you know, it's very difficult for the Bordeaux. The period is really very high, difficult for everybody, I think, because of the crisis, the COVID crisis. I think everybody is touched everywhere in the world, but the Bordeaux wines, in terms of sales, of course, it's very, very difficult. It started with taxes, 25% of tax in the United States. It doesn't help. And then the COVID crisis. So the Asian market is quite difficult today. United States is difficult. And fortunately, today's European market is coming back. So, but it doesn't balance the loss of the two main markets of the Bordeaux wines, which are United States and China. Difficult period. So you have to drink a lot of Bordeaux wines, you know. Please.
I do have to say that
you have to save the vineyard.
I do have to say that for the US market, the Legend was up, you know, by double digits for like a couple of years, right, in terms of sales, and I think it's selling like really nicely now in retail. Obviously, I mean a lot of it, the sales are exploding, but about 50% of the sales of Legend was actually on premise, so it's kind of hurting, obviously. So as we're pivoting to very nicely to retail, we're kind of flat now, and I think it's going to get better, but definitely the pandemic plus the tariffs is not helping.
No, but you know, I speak about the Bordeaux region, generally speaking, of course, the Bordeaux wines. And honestly, Cedric, I'm quite happy with the US market for this range. For example, the Bordeaux white, you know, it's the volumes sold are quite good, in fact.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
Yes.
I agree very much.
Even now with the COVID crisis and the taxes and everything, it's still quite not good for us. So, you know, but for the Bordeaux region, generally speaking, it's quite difficult. Yes, like for most of the French wines, but Bordeaux is so big and the volume produced is so high that, of course, we suffer more than the other French regions because of that today. But we will come back. I'm not very anxious about that. Bordeaux is still here. So we'll be still there after us. No problem.
Well, we're seeing a lot of, Dana, we're seeing a lot of great comments from like everyone. I think a lot of people are going to want to visit you when they can travel again to Bordeaux, Diane, as well. But I think a lot of people have spent already time in Bordeaux, which is really nice to see.
And even for me, you know, it's really so frustrated to organize this kind of tasting. You can't believe me. I would like to be with you in the United States, you know.
Well, we miss you, Diane, but it's nice to have you
And
virtually.
you miss me too. I miss you too.
And Diane, we had 55 guests. So, I mean, this was a phenomenal turnout. I cannot thank everyone enough for joining us. So many familiar faces of people that I've been to Bordeaux with, you know, Jenny, Clay, and Kim. I mean, it's incredible. Some people I've been to Champagne with, Karen. So thank you guys so much for joining us today and talking all about Bordeaux and Legende. And really, you know, I think the main message here is these are 5 wonderful, accessible, widely available wines that really can provide a fabulous overview of the Bordeaux region. Like, I always think of them as like the perfect wine 101 Bordeaux tasting class, really. You're getting something out of all of these incredible AOCs that really, you know, I just haven't seen anything like it on the market myself. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And again, seeing great comments, lots of thank yous to Deanne. You're a wonderful educator, and I totally agree. Thank you, Deanne, so much for spending the time with us.
Thank you very much for your attention and your passions.
Absolutely. Merci beaucoup from all. Yes, just lots of wonderful kudos. So yeah, happy Thursday. I think it's what now, like 2 o'clock in New York and still very early here in the US. So have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy those wines with all types of wonderful cuisine throughout the next couple of days, certainly. And yes, merci and cheers to all. Thank you so much, everyone. Really,
thank you
so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful rest of your day and week and weekend. Thank you all.
So we can